How did a nice boy from Oklahoma end up living in Moscow?
It was within a month of the Soviet Union ceasing to exist. So as someone in his mid-20s, single man, it was just, an absolutely crazy
An adventure
time.
Playground.
And a crazy time, yes.
Back in the day, you were obviously operating in the Wild East. It was obviously mad to the outside world.
That $5 million investment, we made more than $1 billion, 450 times our money, I think. The, authoritarian trend and the increasing role of the security services, my business opponents, their only option to preserve their assets was to go on the offense and have me arrested. The door bursts open and 10 men come charging through with guns drawn and shouting at me to put my hands in the air. A couple of months in prison, endless interrogations. When you realize that the system is just, it's so totally stacked against you that only divine intervention can get you out of there.
Welcome to this first edition of When the Facts Change. I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Calvey, the author of Odyssey, Moscow. Mike, I never thought I'd launch a Substack video channel asking this question, but how did a nice boy from Oklahoma end up living in Moscow?
It was a total coincidence. So I didn't, have any Russian ethnic group, ancestry or anything like that. Didn't study Russian in university. But I did graduate from college in Oklahoma in 1989, which, as you'll remember, was a historic year. And on a backpacking trip in between graduation and starting my job on Wall Street, I was traveling around Europe. And this was the time when, the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, the beginnings of the Berlin uprisings and other things. So I was reading about it every day, meeting people coming back from there, and it triggered an interest in that part of the world that I started to follow. But an opportunity came up 2 years later to join a bank in London called the EBRD. And when that happened, I leapt at the opportunity.
That's the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. People of our generation remember it. It was like a World Bank, a big multilateral Western public and private money pouring into the post-communist world, including Russian. I guess being at the EBRD gave you a ringside seat for those early changes, the transitions, as we call them, from communism to capitalism.
Yeah, it was also just a ridiculously fun place to work for young people. I mean, it was kind of like Noah's Ark, where instead of two animals, there'd be two bankers of different nationalities coming on every day. So there was the Japanese people, the Italians, the Russians, the Danish or whatever. But actually, what was also fascinating, I took 1 week off of work between my job on Wall Street and starting at EBRD and went on a mountain climbing trip in Switzerland. And as I was pulling in by train to the town of Zermatt, I saw a copy of the International Herald Tribune with a headline about the coup when the KGB was taking over. Gorbachev was arrested. This was August of 1991. And I thought, what a terrible career decision I've made. There's not going to be any investment going on from EBRD with the KGB in charge and whatever perestroika, put into the dustbin. I go up and climb the Matterhorn, come back down to Zermatt 3 days later, and there's a new headline in the Herald Tribune with Yeltsin standing on a tank. It says coup collapsing. And, that was the beginning of what was an extremely exciting time to be a young man, working at the EBRD and traveling to the Soviet Union, quickly Russia and 14 other countries.
Now, you grew up in Oklahoma, very much oil country there in the States. Your father worked in the oil industry. You'd grown up in the oil industry. You knew a little bit about energy, but you weren't going to do oil and gas, were you? You were going to be a Wall Street hotshot. And indeed, you worked, didn't you, at Salomon Brothers for a while, at a pretty important time in the history of that institution.
Yeah, my dad, worked in the oil industry with a company selling equipment to oil and gas production companies. And he could only dream of selling to companies like Exxon or Chevron. His customers were mostly these small, kind of slightly sketchy, wildcatters, exactly. So when I had job offers coming out of college from Exxon and Texaco and Chevron, my father was like, son, you've made it, They have the best pension plan in the industry,
Get free
But instead, I took a job with this investment bank, and he thought I was going to be a teller. He didn't know what an investment bank was. So he's like, "Why would you take a job as a teller when you could work for Exxon?" And he didn't speak to me for about 6 weeks after I took the job. But I knew I made the right decision. And Salomon Brothers was just also an incredibly fun place to work. I was there during the Liar's Poker years. And
Michael Lewis,
and Salomon Brothers was just a legendary kind of like aggressive, foul-mouthed, but super dynamic place to work as a young.
This is a family show, but the big swinging dicks, as they call them.
Exactly. They called us all.
This is independent media.
They called us all into an auditorium, and we had no idea what it was about. The senior man, the CEO of the firm, came in. They're just steaming, and they said a book is coming out on the bookshelves today, and it's full of lies. If any of you buy the book, you're fired. If you're quoted speaking to the press, you're fired. Of course, we raced out and bought the book immediately. Of course,
instant classic Liar's Poker.